Welcome. Thanks for joining us on our journey where we're discovering the Father heart of God, where we're leaning into our relationship with Jesus and relaxing and resting in that, and out of that place of abiding, our desires to produce lasting fruit and to help you do the same. And once again, I'm here with my good friend Steve, and we've been talking about sweet spots and the things that are dear to our hearts and in that zone where they just flow out of us. And for Steve, one of those things is really imparting to others a teachable spirit. So as we've talked about that, I wanted to lean into the concept today, Steve, of just our frame of reference and how those two are linked together.
Yeah. Wow, just listening to you, Bob, thinking about teachable spirit, how important it is for us. And I'm thinking people who are watching this, I'm sure hopefully they have a way to contact you or contact me. They'll figure it out, because sometimes it raises questions.
Yes.
And we'd be happy to entertain those questions. Not that we have all the answers by any means. But when you think about a frame of reference, I have a piece of paper here folded up. So a frame of reference would be like a literal frame. It's the metaphor we're using. And inside that, my frame of reference or your frame of reference, this is all that I know, all that I've experienced, or the revelation of God's truth that I have. That doesn't mean that there's not more outside, and doesn't mean that I don't believe in this thing of my truth and your truth. I think we all submit to the truth.
Yes.
But then there's a frame that we have of this is what as I've come to know and understand the revelation that God's given me, that people have poured into my life. And it can be very practical, be from Scripture, whatever. But that'd be my frame of reference. And therefore, I see all of life through this frame of reference.
Yes.
So every question that comes to me, I answer it according to my frame of reference. So even in math class, when you didn't get an answer right, because it wasn't part of your frame of reference. It's not part of my frame of reference, teacher, to do those kind of problems. So so it's the way we live life. But as followers of Jesus, if we're disciples and we're learners, then that implies that our frame of reference will always be expanding.
Yes.
It'll be growing. Now, I'm sure that our frame of reference is not nice and neat and sectioned off like this. It may look like a blob. I don't know if it had a shape, I don't know what shape it would have.
Yeah, and even as you're saying that, I think one of the challenges for us with our frame of reference is to, as we lean back to teachable spirit, to desire for it to grow. Because I think it's real easy, and I've seen it in my own life, to just want to gather information that supports my existing frame of reference. And yet, as I lean into my relationship with God, it does just the opposite. He wants to expand my frame of reference because, well, He's unlimited. There's just so much to discover in Him.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about the frame of reference, and referring back to this, then this is the light. Another way of looking at it, this is the light that I have. Doesn't mean I've got all the light or I'm creating light. No, it just means this is the light of God that's become part of my frame of reference, and it's continuing to expand. And the simple equation that we find from Scripture is that light equals responsibility. And when you think that through, and there's different ways that's implied through Scripture. I think from Genesis to Revelation, this whole idea that light equals responsibility. But then more specifically, Luke 10, Luke 12, where Jesus is, one is a parable where He says, to whom much is given, much is required. It's like, hey, and light is a tremendous gift to us. And then also in Luke 12, He's talking about comparing some cities there that are rejecting the gospel and comparing them to Sodom and Gomorrah. And anyway, so it's powerful there. But this whole idea that light equals responsibility. So sometimes you may have felt this way, and you may have heard other people say this, don't give me any more light. Turn out the light, please. I feel too responsible.
Yes.
I don't want anything else to be responsible for.
Yeah, and I don't know if that'll be something for a conversation for another day, but briefly on that, to me the key's been knowing that I'm loved, and so that with greater light comes a greater revelation of His love. And so with that, I don't have to fear that greater responsibility, because it's not an extra burden, it's actually greater freedom, because light brings, actual light, if we respond to it in a healthy way, brings freedom in my life.
Absolutely. Yeah, the benefits that come to us as a result of increased light far outweigh any sense of more responsibility. So yeah, the benefits are far greater. And so it's normal for us as followers of Jesus that our frame of reference would be expanding and in some respects getting trimmed. I think there's some things that God cuts out of our frame of reference. I know you've been thinking this for a while. I want to work on that, Steve. I want to help you here. I think it's G.K. Chesterton who said, talking about education, and I'm not going to quote him specifically here, but he's talking about learning and education, and he said that unlearning is actually the most important piece. Or it may be implied also it's the most difficult thing too. So sometimes when it comes to our frame of reference, that God's wanting for us to unlearn some things, and that's hard.
Yes.
Because we've often attached an emotional connection to what we think or believe, or how we view things. And when God says, I want to adjust that, we're like, oh, don't touch that. I gain security from that. Like you're saying, don't mess things up. I got all my ducks in a row here. So don't mess them up. I feel secure right now because I've got all these things sort of figured out.
So speak to that dynamic a little bit of unlearning and learning new truths and how those two work together. What's the best way to go about that? Because sometimes we can easily feel almost stuck, like, well, this is just what I do. This is just what's natural, even though what's natural isn't always healthy. Mm-hmm. And so in that unlearning to make room for new truth, how have you worked that into your own life? How does that work?
Yeah, well, again, it goes back to, we were talking earlier about being connected to the rest of the body, but also it's being connected specifically to people that we may not, quote, agree with, or they see things from a different perspective. And I'm not talking about just crazy ideas. I'm talking about, hey, I want to be around people who challenge me. Mm-hmm. So the only way we're going to grow, there's something we can never avoid when it comes to growth and learning, and that's discomfort. Mm.
Come on, we have to have discomfort.
Yeah. It's like, and so as soon as we feel any discomfort in the process of learning something new, sometimes we get bluffed out, like, hey, I don't like this. I don't want to do this, and we run back to our, quote, comfort zone. Mm. And a good friend of mine, Laurie Beth Jones, she talks about that comfort zone is not a learning zone. Mm. It's just a place of stagnation. So it's going to be uncomfortable to grow. And so it is with our frame of reference. You're going to feel the discomfort. So I think we need to be around other people who challenge us in a good way.
Yes.
And we need to be willing to just not get bluffed out by the discomfort that comes. So that's great. So that, and God doesn't seem to hesitate in my life. We talked about the analogy or the metaphor of having all my ducks in a row. It seems like Jesus sometimes takes the form of that little 4-year-old boy that runs through the little flock of ducks at the city park. It's like, this is so much fun. Not that Jesus is a little, you know what I'm saying? It's like, sometimes I think hey, Steve, just relax. I'm going to scatter your ducks right now because I want you to learn something new. Mm-hmm. And so the real thing is my security in what I know? Mm-hmm. Or is it in who I know?
Wow.
And so that's one thing that shows up sometimes when this whole thing of frame of reference.
So as we just embrace that and saying, okay, I need to have an expanding frame of reference, you're good at this. What's a tidbit or what's an application that just is going to help me and help all of us today to do just that, to continue to grow and expand our frame of reference?
Yeah, it's definitely connected to having a teachable spirit. So doing the things we talked about earlier about growing as a teachable spirit. A couple of things to remember is that I can't hold people accountable for my frame of reference. And I can't force my frame of reference on someone else. And so I need to not do that, not come and say, Bob, I'm just going to force my frame of reference on you.
Thank you.
But I should say, hey, it'd be okay if I shared some things with you. By permission, we can talk about things and we can expand one another's frame of reference. So I think, again, just a simple application is this whole thing of being open, teachable, and then being around people saying, who would help get me out of my comfort zone, get me more into a learning zone? Who is it or what is it? Is there an activity, God? Is there a place you want me to go? And lots of stories come to mind. We don't have time for us. God's taken you many places around the world. He's taken me lots of places around the world. And I think part of those, wasn't the only reason, but part of those, because he wanted to expand our frame of reference. Yes. He wanted to get us outside our comfort zones. And he wanted to reveal himself to us in a new way.
Yeah, God's so gracious And he will take us on that journey of expanding our frame of reference if we let him do just that. And so invite you to do that. And thanks for joining us. And once again, thanks, Steve, for sharing from the depths of your heart today.
It's fun.
Appreciate it.